guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show. As always, this is powered by Icon Plus. So I'm going to give you guys a really quick news announcement. South Korea's Pohang city embraces digital transformation by building its very own data economy on Icon Loops' My ID, Korea's first and only blockchain-based digital ID service. So as always, some really cool news coming from the Icon network. I also want to say a really quick thank you to my sponsors, BlockFi. So I actually use them to earn 8.6% interest on my USDC. If this interests you, then I'm going to put the link in the comment section, in the description, and I think it's in the tweet. So you can actually grab $25 if you click the link and sign up and deposit and get some interest with them. So that's really cool. So really interesting today. Bitcoin is looking like it might reach $11,000. We don't know what's happening. So of course, I've got a very cool trader joining me today. It is Crypto Michal. Crypto Michal, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's really cool to have you today because I think, it's been quite a hell of a month. We've seen Bitcoin sort of moving sideways. Everything's looking pretty quiet. We'll talk about DeFi and what that's doing later, but it looks like Bitcoin might touch $11,000 today. What do you think?
Well, yeah, actually, we have seen the triangle, which is a technical structure, but the bullish news surrounding Square acquiring 5K BTC for 50 million is pushing the price up, and it's even long term a very bullish signal for the market. So we might actually crack 11K. It's the heaviest hurdle to take, and if 11 breaks, then we might get new highs, and that's a great signal.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, we hear more and more major players getting into Bitcoin. So I think something like this is obviously sort of what's, I guess, sort of, created this mini run or sort of woken up the beast with everything that's going on. But I kind of want to focus today on crypto and Bitcoin in general, because we always talk about Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the next revolution. We always talk about, the banksters. But I think it's so important to understand what the actual problem is with the traditional financial system. And I kind of just want to go back to basics in understanding that. So in terms of hyperinflation, inflation, just from a really simple standpoint to start off with, what would you say is the biggest issue with the traditional financial system, and why are we looking to build something completely new?
I think the whole issue is that in the basics, it's an inflationary and debt-built system. So everything is surrounded by trying to achieve 2% inflation every year, which is only fueling the rich, and the poor remain poor, which is also what you see in the recent data that's been coming out. The gap between rich and poor is only increasing. So it's all starting by the fundamentals that they want to achieve 2% inflation, which is essentially not even needed if you want to get a great system going. And because of that, you actually get that combined with the low rates, that you can have a ton of debt without any issues, because it will just be worth less over time because of the inflation. So it's risk-free to actually have a lot of debt, which is faulty in general.
But when we sort of say, Bitcoin is this hedge against hyperinflation, when I tell people this, they often think it sort of sounds like the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard, just because we're not seeing inflation rates like you're seeing in countries like Venezuela, for example. So is it that much of a big deal, or are we sort of doing this for the sake of, looking at the broader picture over 100 years and sort of saying, especially what we've seen at the moment, all this printing of more money will only affect our currency, only devalue our fiat currency over hundreds of years?
Well, we've got the issue with hyperinflation in countries like Venezuela and Turkey and Lebanon and Argentina, for instance, and that's a different topic than the US dollar. I've seen people saying that the US dollar might go in hyperinflation or inflation in general, and I think that if the dollar goes in hyperinflation, that's probably the last currency to do that, as it's the world reserve currency. So that other currencies are dropping down and are going in hyperinflation is actually that they are flying towards the US dollar. So in these countries, the demand for Bitcoin or other safe havens is actually increasing, and that's what you see with a really big community in Turkey, a big community in South America because of it, as there's demand. With the US dollar, it's different, as that's m- most likely not going in hyperinflation. It seems very odd to be the world reserve currency going into hyperinflation, but in case of deflationary systems or deflation, Bitcoin can actually also be a hedge. And that's
Mm,
what you have to go back about 100 years to the big crisis in the 1930s. We've seen Germany going in hyperinflation because of the war and all the debt they had, but the US dollar went into deflation, and that deflation surrounded a lot of social unrest. And because of the social unrest, gold rallied with 600% in those 10 years during deflation.
mm.
So it's not depending on inflation, hyperinflation, on deflation. It's just any of these will affect the price of Bitcoin and other safe haven.
And I also just want to get your take because, when we talk about when we talk about hyperinflation and we sort of say, okay, that's not sort of what we're seeing, in countries like America, for example, we're not sort of seeing hyperinflation, but ultimately, there is inflation. So, it doesn't really make sense to leave your money sitting in a bank because, look at it 10 years later, and it loses its value. So is it so much is it more than just sort of looking at inflation? Is it more just looking at Bitcoin as a sort of separate entity, which is, a deflationary asset that, we appreciate the technology behind it, and we're sort of just looking at it as an alternative, just like we look at gold and silver, so it's sort of a parallel option?
I think it's a better option than gold and silver, to be honest, as it's quite hard to carry gold around. I mean,
Hmm.
that's just one of the basic arguments. Um, and Bitcoin in itself is indeed like the past 30 years we've seen that equities and real estate have been great options to put your money in. But we might be going towards the end of this cycle, as the economies always go in cycles, and we've had a crisis in 2008 and the governments did not decide to make the right decisions. They actually made the wrong decisions, causing a bigger crisis to go ahead from here. Um, so in the past 30, 40 years, it has been a great decision to go into real estate and to go into equity markets. However, these become overvalued at this point. If you look at companies like Amazon, and every time when I say something about Amazon, there's always those maxis coming around saying that I'm just bearish and attacking them. But the valuation is just too high for these companies. So at some point, the big guns will start to sell their positions in Amazon just to hedge themselves or just to go to a different asset class through uncertainty. Um, so that's the different part of a cycle. And right now, the valuation of gold and silver is just low, and Bitcoin is a better option than gold and silver. So
Okay,
it's
so
essentially the same.
Okay, so you say it's a better option. I think that's
Mhm.
super interesting. So I have to ask you then, in terms of, gold guys like Peter Schiff, why can't he get on board with Bitcoin? Or even somebody like Warren Buffett? Like, why can't these people get on board with Bitcoin? I mean, do you think they secretly are on board with it?
Um, they might. There's also the
Okay.
consensus that for instance, some people over here at the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, there's the TV show which is at RTL Z, which is a Dutch national TV show, and they had to be bearish on Bitcoin, while the people saying it were actually in Bitcoin themselves.
Oh, I
So
hate that. I hate that so much.
um, that's yeah. I mean, that's just national TV and what they want to
Yeah.
express and stuff. The same goes for big investment funds. They had to be bearish on gold and silver and were not allowed to have gold in their funds, but privately they actually had gold. And now they are coming
Mm.
out with saying you should decrease your position in US dollars, you should increase your positions in gold and silver. So saying A is mostly not what they actually have or what they actually mean. Um, if you are understanding gold, you probably also understand Bitcoin. I can't understand if you could be bullish on gold and bearish on Bitcoin, as it's essentially just very identical asset classes.
That's so interesting. I think we will sort of, I mean, we've already seen people do, 180 U-turns on Bitcoin. So perhaps we'll see, these guys sort of do the same thing. But all along they were perhaps bullish. I don't know. But I want to talk about the term banksters because as comical as that term is, where did it come from, right? So why do people think, the bankers are gangsters, basically? What are they doing with our money?
Well, all tons of stuff that we don't know, and they're doing like every day you can see new laundering stuff or new tricks they have made or new assets they have made, or they're just building financial instruments to make a lot of money with our money actually, and taking a ton of risks with our hard working money, just for their own, for the sake of their own. And
Mm,
that's the whole issue with our system, I assume. I mean, initially the bank was a place where you were storing your money, and that money that's been stored there was used to get a mortgage loan for other people. So
mhm.
that's the initial idea of a bank. And right now, the average liquidity inside a bank is 2 or 3%. 98% is being used to make money out of risky instruments, which is, we don't need it, but that's how our system is built, and that's why it's fragile.
You say fragile, but when I talk about this with people outside of our crazy crypto world, they don't fully get it. They sort of think I'm being, this wearing the silver, was it the tinfoil hat, and being a conspiracy theorist. And I've even had people that I used to work with, because I used to do more traditional media, like solely actual, news, terrorist attacks, migrant crisis trades, and all that stuff. And they think I'm talking about conspiracies when I talk about, what the banks are up to, and so on and so on. So why is this so difficult for people to grasp? People that aren't in the space, why is it so hard? What do you think's wrong?
Well, the people you were talking to, and then probably it's also the generation of my parents, um, they have lived on this planet with 50 years of trust in the government and the current system that they are living in. So if you are saying that the system they are living in is faulty and wrong, it's very confusing for them, because
Mm,
they don't understand. Okay, and then what do I have to believe? What is actually trustworthy? Why are you saying this? So it's for them very hard to get out of that cage, because they have been experiencing the previous 50 years or 40 years, and they believe in that system. And I do believe that during the corona crisis and corona pandemic, more eyes
mm.
have been opened of people that, well, governments in general are not trustworthy as they seem to be. So also the
Yeah, I mean,
financial system.
yeah, absolutely. And I think I was out for dinner with a friend last night, and I was sort of trying to explain to her, why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I love what I'm doing. And for me, it just sort of became like the perfect example to sort of say, well, hang on, the last few months, governments have just been, or central banks have been printing, pumping trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy. And for me, that was just such a fantastic example. And for her, it was so real and relevant. So she was able to fully grasp that concept. So I definitely think everything that's gone on is incredibly bullish for Bitcoin.
It actually is. I mean, the whole fun point is that people in general are reactive and not proactive. Uh,
Yes.
and if you take the example of my country and the whole crisis surrounding positive corona tests and everything around that, in March we've had an explosion of coronavirus tests, and they
Hmm.
had to react based on that. And they have said, okay, we've had that. We have had a lockdown for months. We don't want to have that again. So the next time we're going to act earlier. And now we're
Hmm.
6 months further, and the exact same problem is happening again. The tests and positive tests are exploding, and we all get new measures, and they have been too late again. Just because
Hmm.
people make the exact same mistakes again and don't dare to make proactive decisions. And that's the exact same thing with the financial system. If the big leaders have made proactive decisions in 2008, we would not have the potential crisis that we are facing. But they did not
Mm.
do that because of the sake of their own career or whatever there is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sense there, and I think that's just the natural nature of humans. I think even the whole idea, it's slightly different, but even the whole idea of humans sort of like buying high and selling low, it's that sort of reactive behavior. And even though I mean, look, like I'm long term bullish on Bitcoin. I think this is my predictions, so no one quote me, but I have a sense of whatever, that I think Bitcoin will be at around $18,000 at the end of 2020, right? It's just a prediction off the top of my head. And even though I know in my head, even though I'm thinking, okay, that's where it's going to be, it's still hard to keep, stacking sats and because at the end of the day, there's still risk. So when Bitcoin goes up, we then buy. So that's kind of like our reactive nature. But I want to ask you about the dollar's lifespan, because that's something that I speak to a lot of people about. And a lot of people have said, it's got X amount of years and that's coming to an end soon. Do you have any thoughts on that at all? And is there a lifespan to the dollar at all?
People are saying that the dollar is going away, or the lifespan is ending of the dollar. That's basically saying the same as that there's a different planet around here with life that's actually.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's bullshit. As in the past 100 years, we've had the US dollar as the world reserve currency. Before that, we've had the British pound, and the British pound lost the position as being a world reserve currency because the US dollar came around and they just did not have the funds anymore. But the British pound is still around. But it's not that position yet anymore. So defining a world reserve currency or the monetary place they have is just based on how economies evolve. And right now, the US is the first one, but they have also the biggest problems. They are the epicenter of our system, and just also the issue is there. But is it going away? Never.
Okay, so you think that what's more likely is that we could see what happened to the British pound. So something else could, maybe even a crypto, maybe Bitcoin could become the world reserve currency, and the dollar could be second to that.
Yeah, that could. It could also be that we're going into a transition phase of the US dollar losing its position, and gold and Bitcoin will do well in the coming 10 years, and then maybe the Chinese currency will take over or something. It's very hard to imagine that Bitcoin will be the world reserve currency. I don't see that happening yet. It's just too early. But it is an asset class to save yourself in case of a devaluation of the dollar. That's the basic. So it's a safe haven. Will it be a world reserve currency at some point? It's technology. I don't know. It's one of the best right now. Can it be taken over by a different currency at some point? It could. We don't know. But for the next 10 to 20 to 30 years, it's one of the best options you have. And holding US dollars is also a risk. So holding whatever is a risk.
It's true. Speaking of risk, I do want to chat to you about DeFi, because you post a lot about DeFi. You look at a lot of different charts. You've been posting a lot about Wi-Fi. So talk to me about Yearn Finance. What is going on? I mean, August was quite the month for it. It sort of came out of nowhere, and then what was it, around 32,000? Did it go higher? I can't remember. But tell me about it. What is going on?
DeFi has seen a very large momentum in the summer, and that was just similar to the ICO mania we've seen in 2017. You could create a simple token on Uniswap and just make a lot of money out of it, and now it's coming back to reality. So the scam projects will go to zero, and the good projects will just exist still. With Yearn Finance particularly, I don't know, it's just having a sell-off. Just like any other DeFi project. And right now we're going to see the bottoming of it, or hopefully the bottoming of it, and then the real project will just start kicking off, just like Chainlink did. It's a great project, and it started to kick off after the long accumulation range. It's just back to reality. The only issue is that those cycles become shorter. It's 2 months, and then it goes down 90%.
So, but you think like the fundamentals are there with the project? You're sort of bullish on DeFi, bullish on Yearn Finance?
I'm bullish on DeFi as it's if you think about it, it can be something really big. About projects particularly, it's quite hard as there are so many. I've not been going in depth on Yearn Finance. I've just been trading it as a chart. I've been going into projects like Balancer or Curve. and Uniswap as well. These are some decent projects. And Yearn Finance, I still have to look into it. But as I've been receiving lots of projects that are into DeFi, looking for seed investors and private rounds and stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is such a big signal that we are back into the ICO mania.
But you say mania then. So do you think this is just like a DeFi bubble, or is there more to it? I mean, I do kind of want to just like briefly touch on NFTs, but we'll do that at the end. So like we'll get to that. But there always seems to be a craze, a hype. And I think it's undoubtable that, that's been DeFi over the summer. So is it just like an ICO boom, or is there more to it?
If you would ask me during the summer if there is a bubble, yeah, I would have answered yes, and now the bubble has popped already. It's just going back to reality. I think the majority of the DeFi investors are into depression right now. And now we're seeing a phase where we can start building. So it's just the same indeed as the ICO mania in 2017, only faster. So will we see another hype cycle like we've seen with DeFi in the previous months? Probably we will. But that will probably be like 2021, when there's some really fundamental upgrades being made.
Yeah, and you talk about upgrades, and like I've been speaking to a couple of different I guess like decentralized exchanges, and a lot of the time I hear them sort of sell themselves to me and sell me their product, and they often say that we're like Uniswap, but we're better because we have a better user experience. Okay, so I kind of want to get your thoughts on user experience and how likely it is for this stuff to actually go mainstream, right? Because it's supposed to be the new way, taking loans, lending and borrowing and all this stuff. It's supposed to be better than doing it the traditional way through a bank. So it's difficult for the average person to do this. So how the hell are we going to get to a point where DeFi actually becomes, this normal thing that normal people can do?
I think we get to that stage with blockchain in general when people don't know that they are using blockchain or using a decentralized exchange. So these people would not understand how it works or how it's built up. It's the same as internet. My parents are using internet, but they have no clue how it's built up. They are just using it. And I think DeFi is one cycle behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I'm not that bullish on decentralized exchanges in the short term, as I do believe that the money will come from institutional investors, and institutional investors will not have the ability to invest in Uniswap or SushiSwap or whatever there is. They are going to invest into Bitcoin and Ethereum, as that's the two main propositions for them. And the other coins are just too risky. So I think the whole bull market, the big cycle for the next year, is going to be fueled by people stepping into Bitcoin and Ethereum. And actually having Ethereum is exposing yourself to DeFi risks already, as everything is built on Ethereum.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think you mentioned, more people getting into Bitcoin. And I'm sure everybody watching already knows, but it's super interesting to hear that Jack's company Square actually invested $50 million into Bitcoin. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, why do you think he did this? Do you think it's kind of following on from more people getting involved? We heard about like Michael Saylor and so on and so on. But I know that we all know that Jack is already bullish on Bitcoin. It's the only thing he's got in his Twitter bio. But what do you think that's going to do for the price? And also, do you think more people are going to follow after this?
I think they will. As you can see, I'm seated here at the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, and there's a fund in the back, and you can't see it, but above there's the first OTC desk in the Netherlands that actually got a license from the Dutch bank.
Nice.
What we see from there is that a lot of these big funds and private banks as well are interested in investing in Bitcoin or having exposure towards Bitcoin. So it's already happening in the back, and retail investors don't see that because it's just a different market. So those people already know the potential of Bitcoin and they want to have exposure. Retail investors will not make the market. They will not move the market. It's those big guys that will do that.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, they are going to push the markets, and it's something we're seeing already. It's already going on for a year or so that they're accumulating positions, and that will only push the price further up at some point.
Okay, so look, you are a trader. I gotta get your predictions. So I spoke to Nicholas Merton. He told me, I think he said we'll sort of like crack that 20K barrier by the first quarter of 2021. And then he spoke about crazy highs, I think between 100K to 200K by 2023. So give us your thoughts.
That's quite high.
It is high. It's really high. It is.
I think we're going to crack the all-time high indeed next year. It's quite hard to do that in this year, but there's still the vulnerable case of an implosion of the economy in the US. So if that's going to happen, it might be that we're dropping down as well, just because of the rush towards liquidity. That's what you saw in 2000, 2008 with gold as well. It dropped 30-40%. So then we get an extended bear market or accumulation range. But indeed, if the bottoming is there,
Too long.
not too long, I know. I think we could see some heavy movements as well. So I think we're going to crack the all-time high somewhere end of quarter 1, 2021. I do agree on that. Where we are at 2023, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm not going to say 100K, as that's just at some point we will. But how will the world economy be in that period?
Yeah, but from your perspective, people talk about Bitcoin being this non-correlated asset. So to what extent is it correlated? Because I think it would be incorrect to say that it's not correlated, because we've sort of seen, that it sort of is, especially the crash. Well, I say crash, but what we saw back in March with it, dropped to 4K. How correlated is it?
Correlation topic is just on and off. Like if you're going to zoom in regarding correlations, then probably the past week it has been moving alongside equities, and the week beforehand it's with gold. If you look at the bigger picture, I think everything is correlated towards the US dollar. And when the US dollar is showing weakness, which we have seen in 2017, Bitcoin will surge. Similarly with 2014 and 2015, 2016, the dollar strengthened, 2018 to 2019 as well, and Bitcoin showed weakness. So the moment that the dollar is going to show weakness, I think Bitcoin will surge heavily, and the gold and silver as well. Just similar with 2000, 2006, gold did a tremendous job while the dollar was weak.
Some very exciting times. Right, so we're approaching half an hour. I want to just get your final thoughts on the market, whatever you want to say. I'm going to make you full screen, and you can say your bit. Say your bit. Go on, say your bit.
Oh man, honestly, I don't know what the markets are going to bring you. So you put me on a position here. I think if you want to invest long term in Bitcoin, just accumulate a little bit every month. That's the best decision you can have. Don't push yourself towards leverage trading platforms, as people are saying that you should, or that you see it on Twitter that people are doing that. Just accumulate a little bit every month, stack it up, live your life,
and don't stare at the markets all day.
And don't stare at the markets. It will put your emotions down.
There you go. I want to thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thanks to Icon Plus, and of course, thanks to BlockFi. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
All right, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.